Hayato Kasukabe returned home, where he lived with his grandmother. She went to another world and a guy came to the cafe where she was the owner, but now he became the owner. When he entered the cafe, there was silence everywhere. Suddenly a girl in her underwear ran up to him and called him by a different name. But when she saw who was standing in front of her, she began to scream. The guy ran into another room and met another girl. She stood completely naked and from there addressed the screaming girl. But she froze when she saw the guy, but he immediately ran away. In this cafe he met all the residents of this place who moved here to live. This was a cafe they said was the family of their late grandmother who allowed them to live in this place. Hayato didn't like them living here, and he even had the legal right to kick them out. The girls didn't like this and then one of them came up with a plan to force the guy to let them live here further. The girls thought that the guys had only one debauchery in their heads and decided that this would help them in business. They did their best to arrange situations for him where they could arouse a feeling of lust in the guy or show all their feminine beauty. In one of the plans, the goddess drank wine and went to the guy's room. He was confused about what she was doing here, and he didn't feel sorry for her at all. But the girl began to persistently pester him. But the whole plan was foiled by one of the girls, who was angry with Hayato because she considered him a pervert and wanted to stand up for her friend. In the end, this plan didn't work out and they decided to cook him some food as an apology. One of the girls prepared pilaf for him. She said that her grandmother taught her only this and told her to prepare it for her grandson if anything happened to her. She always had a lot of debt and she carried the child on herself in this cafe. And the last time he quarreled with her and left for 3 years to study at the university. Tears appeared on his face and he began muttering apologies to himself and how he had gone to university to earn money and pay off all her debts. The girl listened to this under the door and Hayato seemed to her not so callous. At some point, he approached all the girls at once and announced that now he would manage this cafe instead of his grandmother. All the girls were surprised and began to think whether they should stay here because Hayato needed workers and he decided to leave the girls. And the majority voted that it was still more profitable for them to stay and live here. The guy never found out their names, so he asked all the girls to introduce themselves to him. Tsuruka Amy is a second-year high school student. Riho Tsukishima, she was a second-year student. Shurajiku Anu, she was also a student, just like Riho. Akane Haoji, a 19-year-old girl who was putting together a music group. Oak Makuzawa, also 19, was studying at a technical school. The moment came when it was necessary to share responsibilities around the house because they are practically a family. The girls found many excuses for cleaning and cooking, which made the owner of the house unhappy. They said that the grandmother did everything around the house and even cooked food for them while they performed duties at the restaurant. In the end, he managed to convince them to clean up the entire house. They did this reluctantly and sometimes even played around and played pranks or did poor work. Oka was washing the floors in the house and grumbling that she didn't want to do it at all. And when she washed the stairs from top to bottom, the guy stood below and saw what was under her skirt. At that moment, Riho came up and said that Oka's underwear was visible. She turned around, but immediately fell down the stairs screaming, hitting the guy in the face with all her might. He thought about this moment as he collected his laundry. When the girls saw this, they were horrified because he intended to hang their underwear, which made everyone feel very ashamed. They looked at him very angrily, although he did not understand what was so shameful about this. But still, he could not stand their pressure and apologized to the girls. And as punishment, he was told to leave the cafe. While he was cleaning, he saw an old coffee machine. Grandmother treasured it very much and did not want to throw it away, even when it became very old. Then Shurajiku approached him and politely invited him to have dinner together because the food was already ready. When the guy refused, the girl said that they should all have dinner together like a real family. The guy was a little surprised by this, but agreed to go to dinner. There, the girls also mentioned the underwear incident, but Shurajiku asked not to offend him. The goddesses suspected her of being partial to Hayato, but they were interrupted by Amy, who opened the windows and doors so everyone could see the cherry blossoms. Then the guy found out that his grandmother asked them to always sit down to dinner together, and the girls promised her that they would fulfill her request. The next day the guy had to learn how to brew coffee correctly and well, as befits an owner. The girls doubted that he would succeed. But Hayato had seen his grandmother making coffee many times and decided to prove them wrong. He got down to business and it was clear that he knew what he was doing and his actions really led him to the desired result. But when Anu served coffee and the girls tried the drink, they said that it was simply terrible and should not be served to customers. The guy was depressed and even decided that he was being criticized on purpose in order to hurt him. In the evening, he decided to practice making coffee as his grandmother did, but no matter how hard he tried, nothing came of it. At that moment he was talking to himself, and Akane, who had been sitting here for an hour, heard it. She decided to make coffee for herself, and the guy asked her to do the same for him. He was jealous that someone could make coffee, but he couldn't. Although he didn't say any polite words to her, the girl made him coffee. And when I tried it, I realized that the taste was excellent and exactly the same as my grandmother's. He guessed that her grandmother taught her how to make coffee and asked her to teach him too. The guy blushed and Akane said he was very cute. She promised to help him with this and they began to learn how to brew the drink. The next day, Hayato needed to notify all the right people that he was reopening Grandma's cafe, and he took Riho with him. While they were visiting, the guy did not show much sociability or initiative, but Riho did the opposite. She spoke politely to people and negotiated very quickly and successfully. At the end of the day they went to the temple, where the girl began to pray as her grandmother taught her. The guy was surprised that such a brave girl thought about such things, but she replied that the guy was no better. After all, they approached people with politeness at a time when Hayato did not show this politeness. And Riho joked and talked a lot so as not to offend people, and the agreements went well. The guy didn't take this matter seriously. Hayato thought about it and simply agreed with her because it was true, although it was offensive. Then he went back to those people to talk to them again. While they were going down, Riho called out to him and said that she had gone too far. The girl lifted her skirt and showed her underwear to console Hayato, but he fell down the stairs in surprise. He often quarreled with Oka over little things, such as when he washed his clothes together with hers. Riho advised him to stop always quarreling with everyone and give compliments, which will help improve the relationship. The guy grumbled and was too proud to behave like that, but he still decided to improve his relationships with girls. In all situations when there was a reason to praise Oka, he awkwardly complimented her. But in response, the girl only became even angrier. In the evening, one of the girls asked Hayato to tell Oka that the bathroom was free and she could go wash herself. When he approached her, he saw that she was standing in a maid costume. She reacted angrily to his visit without knocking, and a quarrel immediately began. At some point, he praised her dress, and then the girl was surprised. She really liked these words because she sewed this dress herself. At that moment she herself praised him that his coffee had become much better. The next day, he told the girls the news that they had restored all connections and would be able to open a cafe tomorrow, which made the girls very happy. And then he gave all the girls the salary they deserved. The guy sold the shares and made money from it, from which he allocated part of the money for the girls. At some point, they noticed that Amy was sitting very quietly, although she usually makes the most noise. But she was acquitted and no one focused on it. In the evening, Hayato sat on the seashore and talked to himself. He remembered his grandmother and his life with her. Amy approached him from behind and seriously asked his opinion about why he managed to get so close to the girls and they became like a real family. All this happened thanks to the grandmother who, after her grandson left, told the girls everything about him. She taught them love and care and even told them how she cared for Hayato, what he loved and how he behaved. It was as if she already knew in advance that she would soon leave this life and thus be able to continue to take care of her grandson. Before leaving, Amy told the guy to forgive her if she made a mistake or offended him. He didn't understand these words and what they meant, but when he came home, he saw that the computer was broken along with the phone. It turns out that Amy was carrying dumbbells with a tray and dropped them on the equipment. This means that Hayato will no longer be able to work and will face a serious setback. This was very upsetting and even frightened the guy and the others. Amy tried to cheer him up and support him, but it only made him angry. After he finished with this income, the cafe finally opened. On the first day of work, we distributed all the responsibilities among ourselves and discussed the schedule. The girls also wore clothes that Oka sewed. After this, the girls advised Hayato to control himself under any circumstances because clients are different. When the first customers entered, they were surprised that the cafe was open again, and the owner turned out to be the grandson of the former owner of the cafe. The guy learned how to brew coffee and therefore prepared coffee for visitors. The reaction to his drink was excellent, and they even said that it was almost the same as grandma's, and therefore they would definitely come back again. The whole day was eventful and good. The visitors were delighted with the new service and the owner. But at that moment a man entered who had abused the grandmother when she was still alive. Everyone behaved calmly and tried not to pay attention to all his words. Hayato even came up and thanked him for everything. But he made the guy bow and said that the grandmother bowed all the time and did it much better than him. This angered not only the guy, but also the girls, who themselves almost raised their hands against him. Hayato politely asked him to leave, but the man began to speak in a raised voice and even lifted Shurajuku's skirt and said that these outfits were terrible. Hayato grabbed his hand and told him to leave again, and even threatened that the case would be taken to court. People stood up for Hayato and said that they would be witnesses at the trial, after which the man left the cafe in anger. The girl thanked Hayato and the day was not ruined. After working for a week, the guys noticed that fewer visitors were coming to them and they needed to do something about it. One of these days is supposed to be Cherry Blossom Day, and every year people organize a festival to celebrate this day. Therefore, the guys decided to set up a kiosk at the festival and thus advertise themselves. But for everything to go really well, it was necessary to come up with a plan and a new menu. When they were making cookies for Sakura Day, one of the ingredients was alcohol and Shurajiku prepared it. And Hayato remembered what happens to her when she takes even one sip of alcohol and became worried about himself. But, according to the girl, during the cooking process the alcohol evaporates and even children can eat the cookies. As soon as he calmed down, the girl began to pester him, apparently due to the smell of cookies, which contained alcohol, and she became confused. The girls thought that the guy was pestering her and repeatedly beat him for it. By evening, the menu, with the exception of cookies, had not been invented, so it was decided to make cookies the main snack of the day. The next day, Hayato, Amy and Oka went to sell cookies, while the rest of the girls stayed behind to watch the cafe. Everything went well, although there were few clients. There were stalls of their friends nearby, but they didn't mind that they were so close to them and they treated them with delicious food out of friendship. Oka was sleeping all this time, and Amy woke her up by stuffing food into her mouth. The girl was angry at this way of waking her up, and she decided to go wash herself. As she was walking back, she accidentally ran into 3 guys and they started getting to know her. She began to resist, but the guys were too persistent and intrusive. As she approached the counter, at that moment Hayato began to stand up for Oka. The guys began to threaten him and behave aggressively. But then other people stood up and threatened to call the police. The guys realized that they could not win this argument and immediately left. The guys thanked people for their help. After their partner's words, their motivation and mood increased. The next day they came to their kiosk to continue working and saw that everything was destroyed and there was a lot of garbage. These were the guys who came yesterday. So that everyone would have no more troubles, the guys decided to pack their things and go to another place. At home, we prepared new resources and decorated the cafe and cart with everything we needed. We advertised on social networks and made everything new for the cafe. They were working in another place, and there were even more people there than initially. We returned late in the evening because there was a lot of work. But on the way they were met by those guys and it was clear that their intentions were definitely not the most favorable. They admitted that they had destroyed the old kiosk and were going to destroy their new cart as well. Hayato stepped forward and intended to give at least the slightest rebuff, but one of the hooligans punched him in the face. A conflict ensued, and when Amy spoke, the guys didn't even take her seriously at first and also intended to beat her up. But the girl knew karate and quickly fought back the offender. Previously, she asked Oka to make a mechanism in the wreaths that they wore at work and used in fights. After several strong blows, the guys were very surprised by her strength and the girl was scared. They ran away and were no longer pestered. And Hayato even recorded their words on a tape recorder where they admitted that they destroyed their kiosk and everyone went home safely. They worked as usual, and Riho was supposed to be at college. But the door opened and she entered the hall in a suit, saying that the cafe was more important to her. All day, as usual, she worked better than anyone and tried her best. And after a day of work, Hayato woke up at night and went to the toilet, when suddenly he saw a light in one of the rooms, which meant that someone was awake. He came there and Riho was there and she was thinking about advertising their cafe. She told Hayato all the plans and ideas for promoting the cafe. And then the guy asked why she was trying so hard if it was just a part-time job. Riho's always cheerful face took on a sad and haggard look. And then she said that her grandmother and everyone in this cafe were home for her, where she found herself in a better life. And she will try very hard to ensure that the cafe does not close and exists as long as possible. The guy said that she already does enough and for her to just enjoy life, she doesn't have to work overtime. Riho remembered that her grandmother told her the same thing, and at that moment the girl began to cry. The next day they had a day off and Hayato decided to buy a new stove since the old one was almost broken. Akane wasn't home that day, and the girl said she was performing with her band over the weekend. But no one knows the name, where they perform and in what genre. The girl only replies that there is nothing to see there. On the way to the store, the guy thought about his business and plans and periodically heard praise from people about Akane. They talked about how well she sings. When she left home, on the way she met Hayato, who called her. He said that he wanted to go to the cinema but did not choose anything and went to her concert, which he really liked. The girl was shocked and embarrassed. She didn't want anyone to see her sing. But Hayato said that he would not tell anyone about his second job and hobby. One day Riho came home and noticed that no one was home. But she heard voices in another part of the house, and when she listened, she got the wrong meaning. But then she found out that Shigaraka was teaching Hayato how to make sandwiches according to her grandmother's recipe. The guy wasn't hot-tempered or sarcastic, as girls often are. He calmly accepted Riho's compliments and put his hand on her head, which made her kinder. She watched Shinijiku prepare sandwiches and immediately stated that this recipe was already very old and they needed to come up with something new. Shinaraku disagreed and said the recipe was very popular among diners. So Riho made new sandwiches and her friend used the old recipe. Hayato was supposed to try these sandwiches, but he ate his own, which he first tried to make, and became very full. Therefore, he no longer had the opportunity to taste the girl's food. Riho and Shinraku were upset because they wanted him to try their food. After some time, all the residents of the house noticed that Amy was behaving strangely. Oka reported this to Hayato that Amy said hello in the morning, thanked him for the food and didn't even ask for more, and that was completely unlike her. It turns out that during wrestling training the girl lost for the first time in her life, and this became a revelation for her. Then Hayato decided to talk to the girl and asked her about everything. Amy replied that some styles of fighters cannot be defeated no matter how hard you try. She was very upset about this and couldn't come to terms with it. Then the guy said that she was just stuck on one style of martial arts and she should try new ones. You don't have to defeat anyone to do this. This will not make her weaker because she defeated these guys thanks to the fact that she wanted to win then. The girl was charged with motivation from his words and raised the dumbbells up. At that moment, one dumbbell fell onto the computer that Hayato had recently bought. This undoubtedly angered him and he began to glare at Amy, but she invited him to feel her breasts to calm down. He did so, but in order to prove that it did not help at all. In surprise, Oka also dropped the dumbbell directly onto Hayato's new phone. He began to run away from Oka to teach her a lesson. The next day there were a lot of visitors in the cafe and the guy asked to help Synergic, but she was busy with something and did not even initially hear his request. At that moment, Amy slipped and Hayato realized that it looked like they couldn't handle it. Riho usually handled the discipline, so he called her, but she refused and even forbade him to enter the room. The guy was already starting to get angry and decided to find out the reason why she didn't let him in. When he burst into the room, he saw the girls changing clothes and looking at him angrily. He was shocked, and the slipper flew into his face so that he would not look. The guy realized that they wouldn't help and left. By evening, he talked to himself again and decided that they had been lazy lately. But then he remembered that some of the girls had a day off today, and he himself asked Riho not to overwork. Therefore, everything was fair and he invents problems for himself. He understood that they were not relatives, but strangers to each other, and hastened to talk about it with the girls. When he entered the room, he didn't have time to say anything. When confetti immediately fell, the girls had prepared a surprise for him. All this time they were preparing and trying to do everything secretly from him. That's why they acted so strangely and made him nervous. The guy was happy about this and there was no longer any thought that they were strangers to each other. Akane walked away from everyone because someone called her on the phone. It was her mother, and Akane was not very happy to hear about her. The next morning, Amy touched her breasts and realized that after Hayato touched the girl in anger, everything hurt. Hayato remembered the incident and became angry again because Amy broke his computer. But Akane calmed them both down and talked to Amy. She began to behave more relaxed and openly, which surprised all the girls. This was not usually the case. In the evening, Akane and Hayato started talking and the guy asked if the girl really wanted to quit her job and leave them. This shocked her because it was true and she confirmed it. He did not tell the others about this, and throughout the following days he asked Akane about all the details of running the cafe that she could have inherited from her grandmother. After all, she will leave soon and it will be problematic to find out. After several such conversations about dismissal, Amy overheard their conversation and told everything to the other girls. In the evening, Hayato and Akane returned home, but not before stopping at a cafe for coffee. While Akane was preparing the drink, she said that she had inherited a big business and was the only heiress. Therefore, she must return, get married and have a child, and a husband has already been found for her. The guy didn't believe it, because her coffee this time turned out to be terrible. But Akane insisted that it was true. At that moment, the girls came running and asked Akane not to leave. She didn't want to quit herself, but her mother didn't stop at anything. Her grandmother was her protection, who promised to come up with something so that Akane would not be taken away and ruin her life. But her grandmother is no longer there, but her grandson is. And in this case, she asked to come up with something. Akane's mother came to the cafe and immediately began a dialogue about the case. Hayato left the words to Akane, which she was completely unprepared for. But when she said that she wanted to live here, she hesitantly asked for more time. But this was not part of the mother's plans and she began to insist on her own. She remembered her childhood and began to insult Akane in every possible way, which confused her. Hayato was amazed at the girl's indecisiveness and said that in such cases, she could pack her things and go home if she didn't want to object. Amy overheard their conversation and told the girls everything. She decided that the guy wanted Akane to go here to her mother and the girls were angry at him for his betrayal. After a little argument, she regained her confidence and apologized to her mother. Akane walked over to the coffee machine and made the woman some coffee. Her mother was surprised that Akane learned how to make coffee, even though she didn't know how to make coffee before. Before she took a sip, Hayato said that no matter how excellent the coffee was, she wouldn't like the drink unless she wanted to taste it herself. The woman took a sip of her coffee and told a story about how she experienced the same thing as Akane. Her interests were also suppressed and forced to follow rules she did not want to follow. but she decided to take pity on her daughter and allowed her to stay in the cafe. She liked the coffee and her face changed. At that moment, the girls ran up to the woman and asked her not to take Akane away. Hayato protested, but Amy knocked him down. Akane said that they had already agreed and the girls understood that Hayato was not to blame. And then they noticed that he was being trampled on while he was lying on the floor. Akane walked the woman to the car, and the mother said that for the sake of convenience she would break off her engagement to her fiancé. And she hinted that Hayato is an excellent candidate for her hand, but there is also a lot of competition. Hayato gave the girls their salaries for June and wanted to tell them one important news. At first he was hesitant to tell them about it, but the girls convinced him. Hayato decided to rent a beach house and work on the beach all summer. All the girls agreed and everyone began to offer ideas for the future cafe. Oka prepared her costumes for the beach and came to show herself to Hayato. She wove a wreath and put on a swimsuit. Such a costume embarrassed the guy. The girl began to tease him and show herself in a swimsuit, watching him become embarrassed. But everyone also wanted to show off their beauty and were waiting for compliments. They have already received permits and even paid for it, but they still need to photograph the name on the internet. The guy started taking pictures of the watermelon parfait that Shinijiku had prepared, but Amy got into the frame and started fooling around, which is why the photo was ruined. When he wanted to redo the photo, Oka started eating it, thinking that the guy had already finished. It didn't work out with food photos, so we decided to go to the beach to take photos. The girls put on their usual costumes, and Amy put on her strange glasses, which really annoyed the guy because it spoiled the frame. But Amy did not want to correct the photo, she simply took off her stockings and ran to the water. There was nothing left to lose, so the others also took off their stockings and ran into the water, where everyone began to splash. Hayato decided to photograph this moment for advertising, and the photos turned out quite well. Everything went well in the cafe, and even the partners came to try the parfait. There were a lot of people there and the guys were working as hard as they could. At one point, Riho became very irritable and yelled at Hayato and Akane for talking at work. But at one point the girl began to stagger and became very ill. Riho fainted and scared her friends. After this, she had a strange dream in which she was a child and saw someone leave her. The girl screamed at the man, ran up and hugged him so that he wouldn't leave. She woke up hugging Hayato, who had been sitting here for a long time. He said Riho fainted due to sunstroke and the doctor advised her to rest more and drink water. Riho began to apologize for being overworked and letting everyone down. Hayato put his hand on her head and said that he was very worried and they agreed so that she would no longer scare him and others. She asked to sit with her a little longer as she had a terrible dream. Hayato agreed and stayed in the room with her while she rested. Riho was already feeling much better and she got to work. She was pleased that Hayato was so concerned about her. When she arrived, she saw that other girls were flirting with the guy. She dispersed everyone and said that she would serve everyone herself, but Hayato was rude. She started working hard again and interacting with clients, and everything was going well. Amy approached Hayato and asked what to do next. The guy saw that the same guys were pestering the waitress. He then commanded Amy to deal with them and kick them out in a commanding tone. She started putting on masks and scaring the guys. At first they did not recognize the girl, but when they saw that it was she who had beaten them, they quickly left the cafe in fear. Riho again saw the girls flirting with Hayato, which the guy even seemed to like. Riho was very jealous, so she loudly and furiously called Hayato in front of the girls to back off. After a day of work, the girls decided to swim at the beach. Amy did not swim with them, but simply decided to dive. Hayato sat on the shore and fished, and Akane tried to read him the lyrics to her new love song. At that moment, something large and heavy took the bait and dragged him under the water. It was Amy who decided to joke and pull the string, but Hayato simply fell into the water and they swam like that for some time. The next day at the cafe they worked as usual, and Riho, as always, worked the hardest. Suddenly, journalists came to them and said that they wanted to interview the best employee of the cafe. Naturally, they met Riho, and when she came to them, one of the journalists was very surprised. After all, he recognized her as the star of a children's show. Riho also recognized him, but asked not to mention this fact and not raise this topic. But all the people had already heard this and began to whisper. We also remembered how 15 years ago a little girl was shown in the cinema, but then she disappeared from the screens. And now she's standing there, dressed like a waitress. She could not stand such pressure and ran away from the cafe. She did not appear until the evening, and even then, when the girls were waiting for her at dinner. The reporter said that her parents divorced when she began acting in films, and her father did not want the girl to overwork herself. But her mother was too involved in this matter. After the divorce, Riho no longer acted. Hayato found the girl sitting on the steps. He sat down next to him and there the girl told him that when she was filming a movie, her father left the family and little Riho was very sad and suffered when he was not around, and after that her whole life changed. They simply found a replacement for her in the role, and she stopped being interesting. Hayato realized that this was why she always worked so hard and had good communication skills. He began to scold her for putting herself at risk and torturing herself because he was very worried about her. That's what her father once told her. From the memories and these words, the girl began to cry and buried herself in Hayato's chest. She asked not to leave her so that she would stop working so hard because then she tried for the sake of her parents. It was a normal day and the girls were working as usual. Suddenly a girl walked into a cafe on the beach and the others thought it was Oka. Amy ran up to her and, as always, began to fool around and show her new strange glasses. But she shouted that Amy was doing nonsense. The girl ran straight home out of resentment. Oka and Akane were busy there, and Amy ran straight into Oka's arms. But then she realized that Oka was now in a cafe on the beach. She walked away and realized that Oka and her clone were standing on opposite sides. Her twin sister Kiko came to Oko to talk. They all got together for dinner and Kiko said that she should go back home and become a designer. The sister did not know all these people and did not know who they really were, so she was worried about Oko. Emotionally, Kiko began to say that these people can be bad and dissolute, but Oka stood up for these words and hit Kiko on the cheek. After that, the girl left them and told them to do what she knew. The next evening, Oka lay in bed and talked to herself. She recalled that her parents wanted her to go to Tokyo University, but Oka wanted to become a designer, so her sister entered instead. Suddenly, Hayato came up to her and said that he could hear everything. He saw her sister, who came today in disguise. Apparently, she wanted to look after Oka and make peace with her. In reality, Kiko was worried and just cared about Oko, something she never talked about. Hayato gave the girl a day off so that she would have the opportunity to talk and make peace with her sister. The next day, Oka apologized that she had urgent business and left the house. Her sister met her at the door and she was clearly looking forward to this meeting. They left the house and Oka said that she understood her and that Kiko cared about her, after which the girl apologized. Kiko could not contain her emotions and began to say that she sacrificed a lot for the eye and said that she did not appreciate it. Oka admitted her guilt, apologized to her and said that she loved her sister. At these words, Kiko burst into tears and hugged Oko. After that, they both returned to the cafe so that Kiko apologized for her words. But when the girl looked behind the doors, she saw that the girls were again pestering Hayato while he was calling for help. She didn't want to show this to her sister, so she just said that she was just taking her to the cafe for coffee. Akane was there and offered the girls cheesecake to keep her sister longer. Kiko was happy about this news. She's been wanting to try cheesecake for a long time. 11. One day, Hayato was working late and Akane came to see him. She offered him coffee and began looking around his room. She asked if he knew how each of the girls felt about him, to which the guy replied that he hadn't thought about it and didn't care. She then said that tomorrow there would be very bright stars. But the guy reacted by saying that he was more concerned about the well-being of the cafe. But he wants to look at the stars and drink coffee from Akane in the future. As she left, she said that the moon was also beautiful today, but she said it as a joke. At lunchtime they decided to all go to the bathhouse together. Upon arrival, all the girls immediately took over the shower room and started fooling around there. Even their work partners joined them and relaxed with him. As they entered the hot tub, the woman asked if anyone had a crush on Hayato. No one admitted this and almost all the girls said that they did not think about it. When only Akane and Riho remained, Akane directly asked her friend if she loved Akane. She answered in the negative, although the girl's cheeks turned red. Akane did not hide this and said that she liked Hayato and had feelings for him. Since Riho is silent, it means no one is against it and there is no competition. While the others were walking home, Hayato and Riho stopped at a store along the way. The whole way the girl behaved quietly and thoughtfully. Hayato even asked her about it, but she said that she simply overheated in the bathhouse. On the way, Hayato bought her a bottle of water. This pierced Riho to the very heart. She was amazed by his kindness and caring. As they walked, she asked herself many questions about how he reacted to Akane's confession and did he want to hear those words. At home, she wanted to confess to him, but still couldn't bring herself to do it. Already at the door she said that she fell in love with him. But then she realized she had made a mistake and asked how he would feel if it were true. The guy, unexpectedly for the girl, replied that he would be very happy. This answer made Riho happy and ran home with relief. The next day, she watched as Akane flirted with Hayato and cuddled up to him. Rika began to scream and argue with her, and at that time Hayato ran away to get some air. On the way, some guys said that two waitresses had a fight with each other over something. Hayato thought it was Riho and Akane and immediately ran to the cafe. During this time, Amy tried to help them find another way to solve the problem, such as throwing a clay ball and whoever breaks it loses. Akane said that she did this on purpose to make Riho emotional. After all, she always and everywhere restrains herself, and it seemed unfair to Akane that she was the only one who got what she wanted. They apologized to each other and said that they would compete without arguing. When Hayato came running, he started shouting that there was no point in fighting over him and that he was simply not in the mood for a relationship right now. Later, Hayato gathered everyone to discuss new ideas. Autumn is approaching and they need to create an autumn menu. Akane said that she liked the idea of the new menu and supported Hayato. Riho said the same thing. Because of the words that it was all a joke, he had no confidence in these words. But Shurajiku herself didn't mind. She liked to cook and the new menu would help promote the cafe. Nevertheless, they made a menu and Shurajiku and Hayato started cooking together. Shurajiku remembered Akane talking about declaring her love to her boyfriend. And at some point the girl hugged Hayato and said that she liked someone. But even if it was mutual, she would not make him happy. She later said that she fell in love with him from the very beginning. Hayato thought she was drunk, but said that her intentions were serious. But after that she began to pester him and it became clear to the guy that she was drunk after all. So he just laid her on the bed and started cooking himself. When they went to the store, they met their partners along the way. They started saying something about grandma, and Shurajiku dragged the guy further. He asked what she knew about his grandmother and what she looked for every night in her grandmother's room. The girl reluctantly said that as a child she came to their cafe and saw his grandmother. Her father and grandmother were on good terms. One day, Shurajiku saw Hayato rudely treating him and her. She gave the girl ice cream, and the girl decided to share it with Hayato. While carrying it, she fell on the steps and spilled the ice cream right on the clothes of the gentleman who insulted the grandmother. He started shouting at the girl and she was confused, but then a stream of water poured onto the man. It was Hayato who sprayed him with a hose and said that he was cleaning up here. People immediately began to whisper and condemn the man, after which he left. Hayato said that he hates him because he always hurts his grandmother. When she grew up, she asked her grandmother to teach her how to cook. She agreed, but in return she promised Shurajiku that she would not tell Hayato why she stopped being a cook. But he guessed why his grandmother stopped being a cook, most likely because of Hayato himself. The guy guessed that the girl was looking for her photos when he was still trying to open a restaurant. When they arrived, Hayato found information about her on the internet and found out almost everything. He told Shurajiku that when his parents died in a car accident, his grandmother took him in with her. And if she opened her own restaurant, the boy would be alone at home all the time. Therefore, the grandmother gave up her dream and the guy believed that he simply stole it from his grandmother. When he left, the girl shouted that Hayato had never been a burden to his grandmother. She voluntarily gave up her dream and was still happy to live such a life. It was much more pleasant for her to be next to the boy and watch him grow. Hayato was touched by these words and said that he would not allow the cafe to close for the sake of his grandmother. Shurajiku said the same thing. Then the girls burst into the room with tears in their eyes and said that they would try too. It became clear to the guy that they had overheard the entire conversation. Then time moves to the future when Hayato's daughter came into this cafe, saw photographs of the waitresses and began to look for her mother there. She started asking him about his mom and when he fell in love with him. He will awkwardly answer that he doesn't even remember that. The next day, the family sat at a picnic and talked. Shurajiku no longer hid anything from the girls and the guy and said that she was now also fighting for Hayato's attention. But she realized that by doing so she had given away the secret that the other girls were also competing with each other, and she changed the subject. Out of awkwardness, she accidentally mixed up the glasses and drank from Ryo's glass, which contained wine.